Okay, guys. So what you see here is the same project that really we've been writing code in. And what I did last week, if you look at the videos, you will see that we had the quiz table. So this table is a table that we defined again in Django using Django's object relational mapper. Essentially, it's a class. And this essentially corresponds to this. So again, we have duration in minutes, we have is op, of course, we have other things, right? So we have quiz title because we added that later. So we have a kind of quiz title, and we have quiz order and kind of is open, and we can insert into it like that. And of course, this class is going to be translated to the create statement, right? So create table main underscore quiz with all the columns, right? So ID is going to be kind of serial. It's a primary key. And then we have all the other kind of columns. So I don't want to write all of that, but you know how to create a table using Postgres SQL that contains 5 columns, those plus an ID, which is a primary key. You should know how to do that. So what I did last week is I created this new table called question, and I gave it some attributes. So that's not very interesting here. But also, I created this relationship between question and quiz. And this is a one-to-many relationship. So this is actually what I've been writing. Again, what I've wrote in the videos that I posted. Essentially, one question is going to belong to one quiz, and one quiz is going to have many questions. And if you see anything that looks like that, that means one-to-many relationship. So this is a one-to-many relationship, guys. You have to kind of make sure that you understand that. It's the same thing for email. Kind of one email belongs to one student, but one student could potentially have many emails. Same thing for trail reviews and trails. So one trail review belongs to one trail, right? So when you have a review for something, say a restaurant or a trail or a coffee shop, that review is not going to be shared. So the same particular review where you say, you know, the noise was nice, the coffee was good, that's not going to be shared, the exact same reviews. That the exact same review is going to be for a particular single kind of restaurant or coffee shop. But that coffee shop could have many reviews from many different people. So that's the same thing here. So all of those are examples of one-to-many. That's, of course, two. Phone numbers is another example of one-to-many. And quiz questions is an example of one-to-many. And here, this is how you do it in Django's object relational mapper. So if you have many questions for one quiz, then you have to define a foreign key in question. And we've done that, by the way, using PostgreSQL. Now, in Django's object relational mapper, that's how you do it. So you give it an attribute name, and the convention is to use the same name of the class. Now, you don't have to do that, but it's a really it's a strict convention. It's a convention that, you know, people expect you to follow. So you would say quiz here, and you would say models.foreign key, and you would provide the class name of the table that you want to kind of reference. And you have to say, when I delete a quiz, what's going to happen to the quizzes? And if you say on delete equals to models.cascade, that means when you delete a quiz, all the questions that belong to that quiz will be deleted. So that's what cascade means. Do you guys have any questions about this? All right. So now if we go to the views, and this is where kind of the interesting part comes into play. For example, let's create a new one. Why not? I'm going to go to URLs, and I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to say kind of discussion. Let's call it discussion. And I'm going to say discussion page. So that's going to be a function that I have to create. I'm going to go to my views. I'm going to create that function at the end. So I'm going to say diff that. I'm going to have request here. And I'm just going to return HTTP response, something like discussion page. Just a simple kind of HTML that contains this text. Now I'm going to run my server. let me change the name of it to something like Django project. It's better than just unnamed. Okay, so I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna hit play again. Okay, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna move the page. You can see it says hello, and that's because, of course, the URL maps to the first one, which is this one. On main page, it's kind of displaying hello. But of course, if you want to go to discussion, then it'll say discussion page. So we've done that before. This is not really new. However, the new stuff that I want to talk about here is kind of essentially adding maybe to my table, possibly, or maybe kind of retrieving elements from my table. So I can do that. I can say retrieving elements. Essentially, elements are rows, right? Rows from my table. And I can use, again, either the quiz or the question. And you will see that it's going to be different than how we've done it before. Adding rows to my table, again, it could be quiz or question. Let me see. Let me open the chat window again. Make sure that you don't have any questions. Okay, guys, do you have any questions, or is that all good? Okay, so let's continue. Now, of course, we can look at the tables, kind of quiz and question, and you will see that it has data, it has content. So here, where is the question? Main quiz. Here's main quiz. It has some content, some quizzes, and we have main question, and here we have kind of few questions that I added again in that you'll see in the videos when you watch those on YouTube. So, but the way I've done that is actually through the GUI. So I kind of did plus and I added the stuff here, and we can do that now, but I want to do something else. The first thing that I want to do is maybe I want to select the stuff. So here, I'm going to say, for example, select. So how do I select in Django's object relational mapper? Do you guys remember if I want to retrieve, I want to say select something from something. How do I do that in Django's object relational mapper? You should know that we have done that. You've been quizzed on that. So how do I do select star from quiz or select star from question?
Isn't that the actual command select star from main or from whatever you want? And then where, whatever specific field?
Not quite. So that's going to be so what you described is the Postgres kind of way of doing it. What we want to do is the Django's object relational mapper.
Would it be using the objects.filter?
Exactly. So Mark is saying that's what we would do, and that's exactly how we would do select in Django's object relational mapper. So let's say we want to get all quizzes. We can say all quizzes. That's going to be quiz.objects.filter, or maybe .all. So that's going to give us all quizzes. I can say all open quizzes, and that's going to be quiz.objects.filter, and then I can say is open is going to be true, and that's going to give me all the open quizzes. We've done that before, and I do expect you to know that stuff. Now, I can get questions too, right? That's the same thing. I can say all questions equals to questions.or question.objects.all. I can say all, for example, questions from some quiz ID. Let's just say selected questions. If I go to questions to kind of see what kind of questions we have, here we have two questions, and I can, I can query by this or by that or by all of them. But I want to query by the quiz ID, again, because this is a one-to-many relationship, and each question has to belong to a quiz. So there is this quiz ID that was created when I added this. So that's another thing that actually I want you to pay attention to. When I did this and I did kind of make migrations migrate, all of that was created in addition to a new column with the name quiz underscore ID, right? So if you look at the question here, you will see that I have all those columns in addition to this quiz underscore ID. So that's kind of important here, because even though I didn't specify underscore ID here, Django actually appends that. So it creates kind of underscore ID, and that's going to be the, so whatever you put here, it's going to add underscore ID. Django is going to add underscore ID. So that's really the name of the column. So let's say you want to get all the questions that have quiz ID 50, let's say, and it's going to be none, of course. But let's try that. Let's say here, where's my views? I can say, for example, I want all the questions and I want to filter. I want to say the quiz ID is going to be 50. And then I can print kind of selected questions. And of course, it'll be an empty kind of query set because we don't have any questions that have quiz ID 50. So let me go here. Of course, let me save that, make sure it's this server reset, and you can see it did that. I'm going to go here. I'm going to refresh the page. And you can see that it says here that the query set is an empty set, essentially. Do you guys have any questions about this? Okay, now here's the new stuff that you probably didn't know, because this is going to be new stuff. Here's what I can do, something that's actually pretty amazing, because in PostgreSQL, or just Postgres, it's going to be actually hard to do. When I say hard, it means kind of more complicated to do what I'm about to do. Let's say, for example, you want to get all the questions that belong to the quiz that has title quiz 1. Okay, guys, let me repeat what I'm saying. Let's say you want to get all the questions that belong to the quiz that has a particular title. So for example, title quiz 01 or quiz 02. Well, one way to do that would be to say, what is the ID of that quiz that we're gonna get the questions for? And then we can use that ID, to do a query, essentially a filter by that ID. Do you guys understand what I'm doing here? Give me a reaction. So if you want to get, I'll repeat that. It's important that you understand it because, yeah, it's very important that you understand it. So, all right, guys, it seems that I don't need to repeat it. It seems that it's clear. So I'm going to go to the quiz here. So I have this quiz, I have this title, which is quiz 01 capitals. So here's what I can do. I'm going to do it the bad way. I'm going to do it the kind of the non-Pythonic or Djangonic way. It's kind of the way that doesn't utilize what Django kind of gives us. So I'm going to go to the views here. So again, let's say I know that the title of the quiz is kind of quiz 001 capitals. I know that. So here's what I can do. I can say, okay, let me get the quiz. I can say current quiz is equal to quiz.objects.filter. And I want the quiz title to be quiz 1 capitals. And let me actually print current quiz, and make sure that I actually did get that. Right now I'm kind of writing code, debugging, and I'm going to just comment all of that. These were all examples of things that I wanted to demonstrate, but we've done that. I don't need that. And of course, we don't need that. So let's see what that's going to print. It should print kind of a query set that contains one single element. That's what it should do. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to refresh. Okay, so you can see it did print query set with a single element here. It's a set that contains a single element. That's great. And if you want to get the ID of the first element, the first and only element, what you could do is you can get the first element by doing this. So I'm getting the first element. I can say .id. That's perfectly fine, right? I mean that, and if you will see that it'll print 17 because 17 is the ID of that. Okay, you can see that here. It's going to print 17. You can see it printed 17. And now, maybe instead of printing it, I can say kind of quiz underscore ID is equal to that. And now I can say kind of all questions, or let's say current questions is going to be question.objects.filter. The quiz ID is going to be equal to quiz ID. That's okay, by the way, even though I use the same exact name, Python's gonna know that this one is gonna be essentially the name of the parameter, and this one's gonna be the name of the variable that I've given the value. If that's gonna be confusing to you, I can change that. I can say quiz ID value, and I can use that just to make sure that we're not confusing things. For me, I actually like to do it like this. But if you're new to Python and new to kind of all that stuff, it's okay. We can do that. It'll be less confusing, perhaps. So essentially, I'm getting all the questions that have the quiz ID equal to this value, which is 17. And let me print kind of current questions, and that should be 2 questions in a query set. Okay, guys, so let me save that. Let me go here, let me refresh that. Let me make sure. Okay, let me refresh. Okay, so you can see here that it printed a query set, essentially a collection that contains 2 items, and those are question objects, because of course I'm querying questions here. So that's fine, that works. And of course I can print that, I can return that to the HTML page by using render. I can do kind of a lot of things here, and it's all good, right? I mean, there's no problem there. However, like I said, this is not a great way of doing it. It's actually slower, and it's more code, and it's harder to debug and maintain. There's a better way of doing it using kind of Django. Do you guys? But let me pause here for a few seconds and see if you have any questions. Do you guys have any questions? Right. It doesn't seem that you have questions. So let me show you guys how it should be done. Okay, I'm gonna actually count all of that, and that will be a little bit tricky, you know, because it's gonna be, but it'll be again very, very useful once you understand it. So we don't need to do that. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna actually do current questions equals to question.objects.filter. Now, instead of saying quiz underscore ID equals to some ID, I'm gonna actually say quiz. And then I'm gonna do underscore quiz title equals to the title that I'm looking for. Now, again, I'll pause here. We'll have a discussion, like maybe a 10-minute discussion about that, because how is that working? But you can do this, and you can print current questions. Let me just make sure that it's working. It's printing kind of the same 2 questions that we have, and then we can have a discussion about that. I'm going to refresh. Okay, so you can see it printed actually 2 questions. They're the same 2 questions. Every time I refresh, it'll print, you know, the same 2 questions here. So that is much better than writing all of that. It's much actually easier. It's much cleaner, and once you get used to it, it's much easier to read also. So let me tell you kind of what we did here. Then you can ask me questions if you have any questions. What we did here is, instead of kind of querying the questions table through the question ID, we actually queried the table through the quiz object, which is actually kind of a row in the quiz excuse me, in the quiz table. So if you, let me go back to the views. If you do quiz underscore ID, if you want to use this kind of attribute, then you have to give it a number. You have to give it the ID, the exact ID of the quiz. However, if you just use quiz, you're able to actually access the attributes of the quiz and query by that. And that is much better. I mean, a lot of the times it's much, but this is very useful. I mean, this idea is very, very useful. And people use it all the time. I mean, whenever you do kind of object relation, whether it's Django or not Django, anything that, you know, allowing you to do this would be very useful. And other object relational mappers do allow you to do things like that. Maybe not exactly like this, but do allow you to do things like that. So if you go to the models.py, so this quiz, again, this quiz, you can think of this quiz as actually a quiz object, and you can use this quiz to kind of access attributes, and you can query, you can insert, you can delete through that. So this is, right now we're querying, so we can, let's kind of do that first, and then we can do more stuff. So let me pause here. Let me go back to the code, pause here, and see if you have any questions. All right. Now, the nice thing about kind of all of that is that you can actually go back even further. So sometimes we have relationships that have multiple kind of levels, the depth is rather high. And this is actually pretty common. For example, you might have a book, or let's say a course, let's kind of stick to the same domain. And you may have a section. And in the section, you may have a quiz. And in the quiz, you may have questions. So all of that questions, this can have a one-to-many relationship with this. This can have a one-to-many relationship with this, and this can have a one-to-many relationship with this, which means that you can actually get the questions for a single course by using this notation. So you can go from the question to the quiz, and from the quiz you can go to the section, from the section to the course, and then you can specify the name of the course. And with just one line, you can get all the questions for a particular course. You can do that. I mean, if you want to do that using the SQL way of doing it, you would have to kind of do this, and you can have many lines. First, you're going to get the quiz ID, then you're going to get first of all, you're going to get the course ID actually. Then you're going to get the section or all the sections for a course, and then you're going to get all the quizzes for that, and then you're going to get all the questions. So you get the idea. I mean, we don't want to do it that way. It'll be way more complicated to do it that way. So do you guys have any? Yeah, I mean, really, if you want to get all the questions for a particular course, you're gonna have to get all the sections for that course, all the quizzes for all the sections, and all the questions for all the quizzes. That's how you do it. But again, in Django's object relation mapper, it's just one line. This one's going to be kind of lengthy, probably. This one's going to be long because you're going to go from quiz to section to course, but it's fine. It's just a single line. Do you guys have any questions about any of that? All right. So what do you guys think? I mean, I think I prefer that you have questions if you have any questions. Let's see, I'm trying to think of what else. What are some of the things that we can do? Again, it would be better if you have questions. Okay, guys. So let me do kind of one more thing. Let's spend kind of another maybe 10 more minutes and then we can end it. So here I'm going to actually create a new page. I'm going to give it the name kind of discussion. It's an HTML page, and I'm going to just get rid of everything here because I want to do some of the stuff here, but it's better, I think, if I do it instead of just showing you code. And here I want to, instead of returning this, I want to actually return current questions. So I'm going to say return render. Let me get rid of that. Again, request is going to be request. We don't need to worry about that. Template name is going to be main discussion. And of course, the context is going to be, I'm going to say current questions and current questions. Again, I like to also do that, kind of give it the same. So the key is going to be the same value here. So that's the value, which is all the questions. It's a query set. Okay. All right. Well, of course, if I do this, it should work. And nothing in my discussion here. I can have something. I can say kind of H1. This is a discussion page. Okay. Let me go here and let me refresh. You can see it just prints that. Nothing really interesting here. So what I want to do is here in my HTML page, I want to access the stuff that I'm sending, and that's all the stuff that I can be accessing really. I mean, I have a key, I can use the key to access this. So for example, I can do this and I can use the key, which is current questions. And of course, again, that's not going to look very nice because it will display the query set of objects and it's not going to display them in a nice way, but still nonetheless, it's going to display something. So what I want to show you is how to access, because this is a query set, you can think of it as a list really. You can access the first element using kind of indexing, and indexing here in the template kind of rendering section of a Django happens by using the dot notation. So you can't do this. That's not allowed in the template section, right? So this is called the template, guys. Whenever you have the HTML, you see we have them in templates. The HTML pages are essentially the template section of the Django. And this is called the brain or the controller. We call it the view, but this is a views file, but this is usually referred to as by controller or brain of the kind of the server, the web server. The web site essentially. So this is called the template. So here I can't use that. I can use .0, for example, and .0 is going to access the first element in a list or in a query set. So if I refresh the page here, you can see that right now it printed the first element. So that's really what happened. Of course, I can print the second element too, and I can do it kind of right below the first element. And it'll be, you can see it'll print both of them kind of next to each other, because I think in the video I do the exact same thing because they're not in a div. So those spaces, guys, will actually be removed. So spaces in HTML don't actually mean anything. So if you want to add a space, you have to kind of use the markup language, those elements to style your page. So if you do this, then that's going to be on a separate line. Okay, now you can actually use the dot notation to access attributes. So you can do here, you can come here and you can say question text, and that's going to display the question text of the first element that is in the current questions query set. So if you do that, you can see it'll print what is the capital of North Carolina. And then you can also do this, and you can say quiz, and then you can say dot, for example, quiz title. So the same thing that you can do here, you can actually do here. It's just a different syntax. Kind of here we use the dot notation, and we use 0 for indexing. But essentially, this is a text. I mean, all of that's going to be essentially a text like a string. But when you do Oh, we should remove question dot. We should do that. If you do quiz instead of question text, then that's going to be an object, a quiz object. And from the quiz object, you can get the quiz title. So it's kind of interesting, and you can experiment with that, but that's going to give you the quiz title. So you can use the dot notation to kind of go from table to table to table through the foreign key, because again, this is the foreign key column. Okay. All right, guys, do you have any questions about this? So this one, it'll be added to the YouTube playlist. All right, no questions. What can we do? Of course, you can loop through that. I mean, clearly we can loop through. I think we've done that for question in all, or what we call current questions. We did that in the past. And of course, you can do question here or question dot question text. I mean, we can do that. And if you put that in a div, then they're going to be on separate lines. And let me just do HR with width, I don't know, 90% maybe, and maybe, let's try that. I think that should display something in me. Okay, yeah, it does display kind of this line. And you can see that this portion that you see here kind of displayed this stuff, which we've done before. So this is really not new. Do you guys have any other question? Any questions? All right, guys. So we can, again, I wanted us to have a discussion. I think I shouldn't kind of just keep talking like that. I think, if you don't have any questions, we can have a shorter discussion, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. I'll mention a few things, and that's how we can do we can do it moving forward. If you don't have any questions, guys, let me pause for a few seconds, see if you have any questions. And if you don't, we can end it here. Okay, all right, guys. So we can end it here. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'll post the video. I'll add it to the YouTube playlist soon. All right, do that.